The honorary degree will now be conferred. I am pleased to welcome Professor Judith Osborne, Vice President, Legal Affairs, and a faculty member in SFU's Criminology, to present the honorary degree candidate, the Honourable Pat Carney.
Mr. Chancellor, it is my privilege to present a remarkable Canadian, the Honourable Patricia Carney. Her contributions to our economic, political, and social well-being have left an indelible mark on this country. Born in Shanghai and educated at the University of British Columbia, she has been a role model of integrity throughout a varied and distinguished career. Curious, fearless, and independent, she was the first female business columnist to write for major Canadian newspapers, and she received numerous awards for excellence in business writing. These same qualities led to her success as an economic consultant and eventually to her election in 1980 as the first female Conservative Member of Parliament from British Columbia. In Pat Carney, Canada found a great asset. In politics, she discovered her professional passion. No request was too humble, no question too trivial, no task too daunting for the member from Vancouver Centre. She was the first woman to hold 3 senior economic cabinet posts. As Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources, she was responsible for negotiating the principles of the Atlantic Accord and for dismantling the National Energy Program. During her tenure as Minister of International Trade, she was the minister responsible for the Canada-U.S. free trade negotiations. Her exceptional work on this portfolio was recognized with an award from the New York Bar Association. And in her capacity as President of the Treasury Board, she initiated the groundbreaking task force on barriers to women in public service. She was also the minister responsible for the Asia Pacific Initiative and a member of the Cabinet Committee on Priorities and Planning. Summoned to the Senate in 1990, she served on several committees, including the Senate Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs, where she furthered the cause of Aboriginal women. She championed the preservation of Canada's lighthouses and maritime history, her efforts culminating with the passage of an act to preserve heritage lighthouses. In recognition of her extraordinary dedication, the Heritage Canada Foundation created a new Governor's Award. She, together with her colleague Barry MacDonald, was its first recipient. Her generous spirit has also touched other causes. She has sat on the boards of major corporations, her cogent opinions valued by all, and her presence an inspiration to other women. No stranger to the debilitating effects of arthritis, she is the founding director of the Arthritis Research Centre of Canada and a tireless advocate for arthritis research. A fellow of the Royal Architecture Institute of Canada, Pat Carney has received many honours, including the Canadian Arthritis Network Award of Merit. Mr. Chancellor, on behalf of the Senate of this university, I now ask that you confer upon Patricia Carney the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa.
Pat Carney, by virtue of the authority vested in me and in the Senate of this university, I hereby admit you to the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa. The Honourable Pat Carney will be hooded by Dr. John Driver, Vice President Academics, and Ms. Kate Ross, Registrar.
Dr. Carney. Yes. Great to have you.
Congratulations. You ready to go?
No, we're going to do the signing first.
Okay.
It is with pleasure that I now call on Dr. Pat Carney for her convocation address.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Chancellor, Mr. President, honored guests, and graduates. You're not graduates yet. It's a privilege to be asked to address convocation on the day that Andrew Petter has been installed as Simon Fraser University's 9th president and vice chancellor. So I'd like to congratulate him. I also want to thank retiring President Dr. Michael Stevenson and the Board of Governors for their part in bestowing this honor on me. It feels a bit like the first day of school, like exciting and a little terrifying. I'm often asked what I consider to be my proudest achievement in public life. During my 30 years of public service, I've been given the opportunity to accomplish a great deal. But in my view, my proudest achievement is that Canadians took the time to trudge to a polling booth in a school basement or a church hall from their home or on their way home from work to mark an X by my name on a ballot and give me their vote for Member of Parliament. Think of the power of that vote. Everything I've achieved in public life started with that vote. Canadians' attitude to politics today is polarized between apathy and anger. Many people feel that their vote won't change anything. One vote won't count, but they're wrong. I won my first federal election by 2 votes. I remember the CBC election night report, and in Vancouver Centre, Conservative Pat Carney defeated former Mayor Art Phillips by 2 votes. For 30 years, people have told me that they cast those 2 votes. They rode in from the cottage. They finished their hospital shift and they ran to the polls 5 minutes before closing. They lugged a tired, crying child from daycare to the polling booth in order to cast their vote. And they were right. They were the 2 votes. And those 2 votes changed Canada. I lost that first election on a recount by a narrow margin of 95 votes. But the momentum from that election night victory elected me to the House of Commons in the next 2 federal elections and subsequently called me to the Senate. My role in negotiating the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, the Energy Accords, initiating RadarSat, our wonderful communication satellite, it's still up there, my efforts to strengthen BC's role in Confederation, and my private member's bill to preserve heritage lighthouses, dozens of other issues all sprang from those 2 votes. And yes, 1 vote can count. Our Conservative government proposed legislation that would limit a woman's right to an abortion, a very controversial, emotional issue. But Bill C-43 was poorly drafted. to appease conflicting views in the country, and I couldn't support it. Prime Minister Mulroney declared a free vote on the issue. The legislation passed the House of Commons. But when it came before the Senate, despite heavy pressure from my Conservative colleagues, I joined those senators who voted nay. The result was a tied vote. Under Senate rules, a tied vote defeats legislation. Bill C-43 became the first government bill to be defeated in the Senate in 30 years. If I had voted yea, we would have unfair and unenforceable abortion legislation in Canada today. So one vote did make a difference. I suggest Canada's greatest national treasure is our parliamentary system of democracy. We elect some of us to govern all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color. We have one of the most accessible political systems in Western democracies. Any Canadian citizen aged 18 years or older can be a candidate for federal office unless he or she has been convicted of a criminal offense that restricts that right. Anyone with $1,000 and 100 signatures can file nomination papers. He or she does not even have to be a member of a political party. When I first ran, I took out my first Progressive Conservative membership card, and my supporters raised the $200 and collected the 25 signatures that were necessary then. After I won in Vancouver Centre that nomination, one of my opponents for the nomination ran for another party in another riding and won the seat. He was an honourable MP who served his constituents well, and no one ever mentioned his change of party affiliation. Nor is experience necessary. The Progressive Conservative Handbook for candidates posts this question: why do you want to run? My answer: because the Tories tell me that I'm an economic Joan of Arc who can save the country. Another question: well, what experience do you have? My answer: none, either in politics or being burned at the stake. Unlike other countries, the candidate doesn't have to be rich. The most successful candidate in a nomination race is the person who signs up the most members. The funds for pamphlets, posters, and buttons are raised by supporters. Once the election is called, there are strict limits on what candidates can spend or what supporters can contribute. If those limits are exceeded, the candidate and her official agent can go to jail. In Canada, you can't buy a person's vote. You must ask for it. Of course, sometimes that vote is not available under any circumstances. An example is the sweet-faced senior I approached while I was campaigning. When I held out my hand and asked her for her vote, she answered, "My hand will wither and drop off before I shake hands with a Conservative." Under current rules, taxpayers subsidize the federal election costs of all parties, even the Bloc Québécois, which is committed to breaking up Canada. Compare this with elections in other countries where candidates for office, both winners and losers, can spend millions of dollars. Volunteers are the core of our Canadian system. They put up the campaign signs and they knock on the doors to identify voters that might support the candidate and those that might not. They staff the phone banks and drive voters to the polls. They raise and record those campaign funds. They accompany the candidate on bus stops and street corners to meet potential voters. And they have a lot of fun. Once, as we careened over Burrard Street Bridge on the back of a flat-deck truck, bands playing, blue balloons bouncing, I asked a volunteer, "How did we ever get a license to do this?" He answered, "What license?" Many of those volunteers are here today. Thank you. Once you win, you represent all your constituents, whether they voted for you or not. As their MP, you learn the issues which trouble them. You share their joy and their pain. The heart of the riding is your constituency office, which is open to all. The constituency assistant seeks aid for desperate people and holds the hand of the person who is under deportation order while he awaits for officials to take him to the airport. My constituency assistant, Margie Lewis, is here today. In Ottawa, you are an honourable member, a lawmaker. Our democracy is based on the rule of law. Under our system, it is the role of the government party to propose legislation and the role of Her Majesty's loyal opposition to oppose those laws they wish to change. That tension produces the laws that govern us, at least until the next election. Politics is a collaborative profession. Cabinet ministers must achieve consensus on government policies, since if they can't support them, they must resign. That consensus, despite regional, linguistic, and ethnic differences, bands us together as a nation. MPs can make a difference through committee work and private members' bills. The ND party has yet to form a federal government, but BC NDP members, Don Black and Margaret Mitchell, initiated legislation that helps protect the security of women today. And of course, NDP MP Lynn MacDonald was allergic to cigarette smoke. She couldn't stand all that smoke in the NDP caucus room. The result is the ban on smoking in federal buildings today. Senators can make a difference by advancing issues that appear marginal to society. Two BC Aboriginal women, Wendy Lockhart Lundberg and her aunt Maisie Baker, brought to senators the astounding injustice that under existing Aboriginal rights, Aboriginal women do not have the protection of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. After years of Senate hearings and committee work reports, Canadian courts have ordered Parliament to correct this injustice. Now it's Auntie Maisie's birthday today, and she's here with us. And the politicians whom your votes elect contribute to society as well as politics. The indomitable Flora MacDonald, Canada's first female Minister of External Affairs, now in her 80s, can be found in Afghanistan, Africa, Tibet, wherever, helping local communities. Our Conservative colleague Mary Collins, former Minister of Health, helped reform healthcare systems in Russia, serving as head of the World Health Organization for Russia before returning to Canada 3 years ago. Mary is with us today. And the late, great NDP MP Maureen Jewett served as president of this great university. Now, these are not patronage appointments. My critics will point out that my examples are all women. Men can and do speak for themselves. Women still tend to downplay their achievements, so I am grateful to Simon Fraser University for the opportunity to share our political experiences with you today. A final point. You leave here with more than your memories and your academic credentials for which you have worked so hard. You have your right to vote, a privilege denied many others in our global community. You have your freedom to participate in our political system. Treasure that privilege and that freedom. They're both free. And never forget how 2 votes changed Canada. Thank you.